Is A.J. Dillon guaranteed to make the team?
No, absolutely not. And look, I love AJ, and I think there's zero doubt that he is going to have something to prove when those pads come on, and he's got to, make some tough yards and step in there in pass protection and do the things that he can do. But he's just been somewhat inconsistent in that regard, and I think that's why the Packers were able to get him on such a cheap deal. There's no guarantee. If they decide, we are fine with not only Lloyd but Wilson behind Josh Jacobs, maybe they certainly could make the determination. Yeah, we just don't need AJ Dillon.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Jordan Love had a great 2023 and established himself as the Packers franchise player. But he has a lot of talent around him, and it's pretty difficult to parse through for fantasy football. So I went to an expert, Aaron Nagler of Cheesehead TV, to help me. I'm Joe Dolan. Like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the Fantasy Points channel for 32 breakdowns of all 32 NFL teams. This is Franchise Focus, Green Bay Packers. Aaron, obviously Packer fans are thrilled about Jordan Love and the end of the season that he had and going into Dallas and winning in the playoffs. I don't want to spin this negatively, but I talked to our Texans guy, Cody Stutes, about this as well, because everybody's jazzed up about CJ Stroud in Houston,
right?
As is to be expected. What is there that Jordan Love can get better at? And is there anything that you see in his game and in his tape that might put him on, not necessarily on a downward trajectory, but could prevent him from hitting what is a very high ceiling at this stage?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the end of the year, he was absolutely, top 5 in almost every single quarterback metric you can look at, right? He was playing as well, if not better than pretty much anyone in the league for a good stretch there. And that's a hard thing to do consistently year after year, let alone week after week. I think the idea that, yes, you're right, Packers fans are insanely excited about Jordan Love for good reason. But finding that consistency throughout a 17-game season, that's not something that you just flip a switch and make happen, right? Like, Jordan knows that he has to be consistent throughout the year. He knows that that's the standard now that he's set. And I know he's talked about it at his locker a couple of times this offseason already, but there's a huge expectation there. And I don't know if there's any one area of his game where he has to, quote, improve outside of maybe you might be able to point to the deep ball and being able to connect a few more times, again, a little bit more consistently with whether it's Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, whoever down the field. That's something that wasn't there a good chunk of the season last year, no matter where in his kind of campaign you look. That was something that was a little more kind of hit and miss, right? Where, with Aaron Rodgers having been in town for so long, you definitely got used to a few more of those connecting on a regular basis. I think that's something that you could point to where if there's an area that you'd like to see a little bit more consistency, connecting on the deep ball is one thing you could point to. But for the most part, I don't think there's an area, whether it's, the work he did at the line of scrimmage, kind of the second half of the year, really took off as far as identifying what the defense was trying to do pre-snap, being able to adjust protection, do some route adjustments at the line of scrimmage, and really take advantage of teams trying to kind of get the better of him. That's something where you got to suspect that teams will have spent the entire offseason breaking that stuff down and trying to find little, parts of his game that they can try to exploit. I don't doubt for a moment that he and Matt are trying to get ahead of that already with whatever they're designing offensively. But yeah, the consistency is something that is going to be really hard to replicate. It's going to be hard to find over the course of a 17-game season. He definitely was on fire at the end of last year, but to do that throughout an entire season, that's another challenge.
So you mentioned the deep ball as being something that could potentially be improved. Well, one way that could be improved, I would think, is to have the Packers' fastest wide receiver consistently on the field, that being Christian Watson.
Help.
And
right.
That was something this offseason that we have learned is that he believes that there is a size imbalance in his two legs, a muscle imbalance that might be leading to his hamstring strains, his chronic hamstring strains. How much validity do you believe there is to that? And what are your expectations for Christian Watson in year 3?
Oh, I think it's an incredible discovery, and it's frustrating that it took 3 years into his career for it to be made. But it took his injuries and the frustration around them for the Packers to send him and Eric Stokes to basically, hammy camp, for lack of a better word, down there at UW-Madison, and that's where those discoveries were made. Now, I'm excited at the prospect of, okay, maybe they have discovered something here and they figured it out. And I know Christian talked about it at his locker this offseason, but at the end of the day, you still got to get on that field and perform. And I understand that maybe there are some, really finite things that they're going to be working on as far as the imbalance, that what he has to do to kind of build up one leg to meet the other and all of that. But I don't think Packers fans will be kind of doing anything but holding their breath every time they see him kind of turn it loose, right? Like every time you see him get into the open and really turn on the jets, which is exciting. And there's no doubt that he's, this incredible athlete that is very exciting with the ball in his hand. But I don't know, after watching him go down against the Chiefs last year and then pretty much holding your breath every time he was out on the field after that, I understand that, yes, they have confidence in it, but as a fan, it's going to be really hard to not be kind of feeling a little bit kind of gun shy until, again, he finds that consistency and is on the field for the majority of the season.
So, Aaron, I want to suss out this wide receiver core because it might be. I mean, there are other questions for the Packers. The Packers are, quite frankly,
Sure.
one of the single most interesting fantasy teams there is this year because of the level of talent they have. But I'm looking at some underdog fantasy ADPs right now. The first Packer wide receiver off the board is Jaden Reed at wide receiver 34. Then it's Christian Watson at wide receiver 46, essentially a number 4 wide receiver. Then we get Romeo Doubs at wide receiver 53. And then all the way down to Dontavion Wicks at wide receiver 60. So they're kind of bunched out and spread across the middle rounds. Presuming everybody is healthy, which is a big presumption,
That's a big if,
given the
right?
Christian Watson history.
Right.
How do you see this shaking out at the wide receiver position? And is there anyone who kind of stands out as maybe a little bit of a value?
I mean, first of all, if Watson, and it's a huge if, but if Watson is healthy, at least relatively so, in my mind, it's not even a question. He's your best wide receiver in Green Bay. He's the one who's going to be given probably the most opportunities as far as game plans being drawn up Monday through Saturday to try and get him the ball. Yes, I do not doubt if he is kind of productive and starts getting on a roll, so to speak, defenses will likely adjust, start rolling coverage to him, etc., and that should help other people. But I do not doubt for a moment that if he's healthy, he's your guy in Green Bay, so to speak. Though they've all, Matt, Jordan, everybody in the offense really has talked about how much they like not having a true number 1 wide receiver. They love the idea of being able to spread the ball around, defenses not being able to key in on a guy. But I will say, of the list you just had there, to me, the real kind of value, and I don't think it's close, is Dontavion Wicks. Because I do not doubt for a moment that while his opportunities may not be as plentiful as Watson and Reed, at least early in the season, he's got all the talent in the world. And you talk about unlimited upside and just a killer release off the line of scrimmage. You can look throughout his tape in 2023, just crossing guys up and making guys look foolish at the line of scrimmage, trying to check him or be physical with him at the line. He is so good in that aspect of his game already. You give him another year, he's had a year in the offense now. I do not doubt for a moment he'll get more opportunities and he's going to make the most of him. He, as far as a value play, Wicks is your guy.
Oh, our guy Ryan Heath is going to be thrilled to be hearing that from you, somebody who has the expertise. Let's go to the running back position now. Also interesting to talk about. We kind of had a little bit of a tiny bit of a revival of the running back position in the free agent market, obviously,
Right.
with Saquon Barkley getting a multi-year deal and Joe Mixon got a multi-year deal and Devin Singletary and Derrick Henry. Josh Jacobs signed on paper the biggest deal of all of them, but it essentially boils down to a 1-year contract. What's kind of your read on the Josh Jacobs situation, and why were they so willing to move on from Aaron Jones to go get somebody like Josh Jacobs? It's a really interesting onion to peel the layers back from.
Well, I think a big part of it is, you look at the age. Obviously, Jacobs is a younger prospect, and they've basically given him the deal they gave Aaron Jones a couple years ago, right? Kind of swapping him out, getting a little younger there. And I think no one in the organization would ever say this out loud or publicly or whatever, but I do think they probably reached a point where they were just frustrated with the idea of, okay, we love Aaron Jones. We love that he is as talented as he is and such a game changer, and he does what you look at that stretch he had at the end of last season. It's absolutely insane. But it took until the end of the season for him to get on the field with regularity. I just think for whatever reason, they probably hit a point where they were tired of, Aaron Jones is out there and they have a great run and they have a couple great plays, and then all of a sudden he's tapping his helmet and he's on the sideline, right? Every couple series, you've got, where's Aaron Jones? And you see him there being kind of looked to by the trainers, and the word from the bench is he's fine, but they're still dealing with something, right? And it felt like that was continuous throughout these last couple years with Jones. So the talent is undeniable, and I don't doubt for a moment he'll be in Minnesota, wrecking people, going through defenses like he always has. But I think the Packers wanted to move on, somebody younger, somebody with a bit more, I don't know, I guess, ability to stay on the field. I think with Jacobs, he is much more of a workhorse back. He's a guy who you can give him a ton of carries and you can, like, I don't want to say ride him into the ground, because I don't think Matt and the offense wants to do that, but you can certainly count on him probably a bit more. I'm not, running back is obviously what it is, and guys are going to get hurt, but I just think Jacobs is a little bit more sturdy in that regard. And I also think when you look at the frustrating, I think you could fairly say, season that Jacobs had in, Las Vegas last season, I do think that's a value play, because I don't doubt for a moment that he will not only get his opportunities on the ground in Green Bay, but I think LaFleur is chomping at the bit to get him involved in the passing game. I think that's something where I don't think you've really seen what Jacobs is capable of in that regard. And I think in LaFleur's offense, he's going to get ample opportunities. And you talk about, you think about fantasy, he is going to be a PPR machine. That's my guess.
Well, that's really interesting because they signed Josh Jacobs to this deal, which they could get out after 1 year, but also spent a day 2 pick on a really interesting prospect in MarShawn Lloyd, a guy who was very impressive to me down at the Senior Bowl, kind of a human joystick type of back.
Yes, right.
Much more of an elusive back as opposed to Jacobs' kind of slashing, more powerful style. Now, 2 questions here. We've seen Matt LaFleur throughout his tenure with the Packers aggressively rotate backs. That doesn't mean they don't produce. It just means that he likes to rotate them. But we've also seen a previous day 2 pick, A.J. Dillon, essentially not do anything for the majority of his rookie season. Where does MarShawn Lloyd fall in this rotation? And could he steal some of those third down snaps from Josh Jacobs?
He could. He's got a long way to go as far as being able to be trusted in pass protection, not putting the ball on the ground, something that, he did have his issues there in college. And then lo and behold, very literal first day of OTAs, he puts the ball on the ground, right? That's something where he's got to earn those opportunities. And by earning them, he's got to show that, not only is, careful with the ball, ball is life, but, know your protection assignments. There's no way you're getting put in there, especially on third downs, if you're not being, knowing exactly where you're supposed to be in pass protection, being able to step up in there and take on those blitzing linebackers and safeties, what have you, and keep Jordan Love upright, because that's the franchise. That's the guy they're about to pay a bunch of money. So I think we've got a little ways to go in that regard. I think the talent is undeniable. I think, like you're saying, I think he's a great compliment. And I don't doubt for a moment that they're going to try to see what he's capable of in preseason, especially as far as giving him probably a bulk of work. So trying to make that determination. But I think if those things come up, correctly, there's no doubt in my mind that Matt will continue to want to rotate, because he's talked many, many times about, oh, you definitely need 2 backs, if not 3. It's a long season. The wear and tear at that position is undeniable. I think, like I said, I think they'll at least start with Jacobs probably predominantly getting, much of the work, though they'll always rotate. But I think if Lloyd shows that he can handle it and he's, up to snuff, so to speak, in those kind of really particular situations, I don't doubt for a moment that you'll start to see, as the season goes on, they'll start to be a little bit more liberal. Maybe not 50-50 split, but they'll start mixing him in about a bit more as the year goes on.
Is A.J. Dillon guaranteed to make the team?
No, absolutely not. And look, I love AJ, and I think there's zero doubt that he is going to have something to prove when those pads come on, and he's got to, make some tough yards and step in there in pass protection and do the things that he can do. But he's just been somewhat inconsistent in that regard, and I think that's why the Packers were able to get him on such a cheap deal. It's no, but there's no guarantee. If they decide, we are fine with not only Lloyd but Wilson behind Josh Jacobs, maybe they certainly could make the determination. Yeah, we just don't need AJ Dillon. However, all of that said, AJ is a vet. He knows their offense like the back of his hand. He does look a little different. His physical makeup. I'm fascinated to see what happens when those pads come on at training camp and see, what appears to be a guy who really understands that he's in a make or break situation. Look at AJ's game down the stretch last year. I think a lot of fans had their perception colored by some really frustrating moments early in the season. Aaron Jones goes out after the week 1 game in Chicago. AJ is kind of thrust into the starter's role. And I don't think it's telling tales out of school to say he just really didn't deliver in the way you expected him to. But as the year went on, I think about from week 5, 6 onward, he played really well. And if he can pick up where he left off in that regard, I think, there's a path forward for him to make this team. And look, if you're a backup running back, you're going to have to contribute on special teams, something AJ has done throughout his career in Green Bay. So I don't doubt for a moment that he'll be given every opportunity. I expect he probably will make the roster, but I don't think it's guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination.
And if he doesn't make the roster, that would ostensibly mean that Emanuel Wilson would make the roster and could have a role. What kind of back is he? They signed him to an exclusive rights free agent tender, which obviously suggests that there's something about him that the coaches liked with his game and his practice habits.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a shifty guy and he's got some speed. I think he's kind of in fans' minds, probably living off a huge touchdown run that he had in the very first preseason game last year against the Bengals. He got out the gate, made a safety missed, and was up the sideline for an 80-plus yard touchdown. Like, that is how you make an impression, right? It's frustrating because last year he finally got on the field and it looked like he was about to get involved in the offense, and then he got hurt right after Aaron Jones got hurt in a game about midway through the season. So we haven't really had an opportunity. He's had, a handful of carries here or there. Hasn't really been utilized in the passing game very much, though he did have a pretty big reception in the playoffs. I do think they've got talent there. They're like, he's a guy who can step in and give you, you know, a handful of carries, maybe 5, 6 a game, and help you kind of get through the game, so to speak. I don't ever see him as a frontline guy, a guy they're going to count on to be their lead, back at any point in his career. But he's certainly someone who has shown the NFL game's not too big for him. He can do everything that's asked as far as pass protection goes, working in the receiving game. So that's why I say, like, that's if AJ Dillon comes out and plateaus and doesn't look like he's getting any better, or doesn't look like he's really taking that step forward that they need him to. Yeah, I think they'd be more than comfortable with Wilson in that regard.
So we talked about the wide receiver position for the Packers and some of the discrepancies between the ADPs in the early going. And you highlighted that the guy who's going last, Dontavion Wicks, seems to be the best value. My question to you now is, with the second-year tight ends, Luke Musgrave, tight end 17 right now, essentially a 12th or 13th round pick. You're not spending a lot to get Luke Musgrave, but he is the 17th tight end off the board. And then there's Tucker Kraft. He's going off the board as the tight end 30. Essentially, he's a last round pick on Underdog Fantasy. I know he's dealing with a little bit of an injury right now, but do you think that's a fair average draft position discrepancy between the two young tight ends for the Packers?
I mean, fair, probably not, but I understand why that perception is existing, right? I think with Musgrave, there's zero doubt that he's got the most athletic upside. And for me, when you look at the two, Musgrave's the one who they're drawing plays up for, right? Like, Tucker absolutely played out of his mind the second half of the season last year. I think he's one of the most improved in-season players I've ever seen in my entire life watching the Green Bay Packers, as far as he looked absolutely lost last summer in training camp, preseason, even into the beginning of the regular season. I mean, it was hard to watch. And then Musgrave got hurt halfway through the year. Kraft stepped in and was outstanding. So I understand why people maybe look at Kraft and think, oh, there's a value there as far as, where his ADP is. But for me, Musgrave is just much more talented, much more upside. And again, they have a ton of stuff. And you saw this last camp, his rookie year. They have a ton of stuff drawn up for him specifically, as far as, route combos that are designed to get him open, stuff where it's 3rd and 3 and we want a shallow crosser to Musgrave to take advantage of a safety or a linebacker. That stuff is in the playbook. You know that's there. I haven't seen that in regards to Tucker. That doesn't mean that, they won't be calling plays for Tucker Kraft, but I just know at this moment that those are the plays that you're probably going to get called in the huddle and get executed on game days. Whereas with Tucker Kraft, yeah, he may, especially if both are healthy, he'll get his opportunities, but it's going to be rare where with all those pass catchers, his number is going to be called a lot less than Musgrave's. Now, the one thing that could change all this is the actual design of the offense, which Matt did indicate at the end of last season, and he's kind of reiterated it this spring. There's a lot more 2 tight end stuff in the playbook. That's something they want to utilize and they want to capitalize on, especially with Kraft's, emergence in the second half of the year. They know they can count on him. So I got to think you're going to see more 2 tight end stuff, especially, as the year goes on. But ultimately, I still think this is Musgrave's position, and he's the one who's going to get his number called more often.
So the one thing that has kind of derailed the Packers offense in recent years, if the Packers offense got derailed, was injuries to the offensive line. And
Oh, yeah.
not to disparage the career that David Bakhtiari had, but the Packers have finally kind of cleared the what if. Like, you're not counting on David Bakhtiari at all. What are you expecting this offensive line to look like? And should there be a little bit more consistency and a little bit more reliability moving forward? Obviously, with the addition of Jordan Morgan, the rookie first rounder out of Arizona.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, the Packers talk about getting the best 5 out there, right? And there's no doubt looking at the offseason so far, as far as the 3 OTA practices that the media has been allowed to watch, they are playing guys everywhere. I mean, I think Josh Myers, the center, is the one guy who hasn't played anywhere else, but everybody else has played multiple positions. They're looking to get the best 5 guys out there. And they've shown, hell, not only week to week, but even in game, that they are not afraid to move guys around. I mean, last year they had a platoon at left tackle and right guard for like 5-6 games. So I do think you're going to find, a lot more consistency right out of the gate. That's something that really hurt them early in the season. As much as the receivers were struggling with their route combos and Jordan Love maybe, obviously making some boneheaded decisions early in the year. I mean, I think the thing that probably gets kind of forgotten is the inconsistency along the offensive line, especially in the run game. If they can find that best 5, early-ish in camp and then get them kind of working together into the regular season, that season opener down in Brazil against the Eagles, I suspect you'll see, a lot more consistency because the talent is undeniable. They've got what they need in that regard. I think there's some battles to play out, but ultimately, if they can find that 5 quicker, so to speak, I think you're going to see a lot more consistent play up front in front of Jordan Love.
One more before I let you go, because John Hansen would absolutely kill me if I didn't bring this up. He grew up with Bo Melton's father in New Jersey, and Bo Melton made some plays for the Packers down the stretch.
Love me some Bo Melton, man. Love me some Bo Melton.
Is he going to be on this roster, and what kind of role can he have?
I will be shocked if he's not. Yes, I think he will. I think he'll be a complimentary piece, but I do not doubt for a moment you're going to see big plays from him. Maybe not every single week, but there's little doubt in my mind that there will be opportunities for him. And I think some of it's going to be dependent on, the opposition and what they like to play defensively. How can we take advantage of that? Where can we utilize his speed, etc. But I also think, this is the NFL, man. The injuries strike always. Like that is just a foregone conclusion. And I do think, when and if that happens, he's going to get opportunities. He's going to be able to see a lot more of the field. So I think he is a great depth piece. I do not doubt for a moment that he will make, the most of every single opportunity he gets. I love him as a player. You loved what you saw from him last season, and I am so excited to see him when I get to Green Bay for training camp this summer.
His name is Aaron Nagler. He is the co-founder of Cheesehead TV. Has a phenomenal logo, if obviously you're seeing here on the YouTube channel. And he has a ton of swag. So if you're a Packers fan, you better get some of that swag. And by the way, if you ever, for 1 second, think that there's not a lot of ball game left, he will be there on Twitter to remind you that there is always a lot of ball game left. You can follow him at Aaron Nagler. Aaron, thanks so much. And we'll be keeping up with your updates throughout training camp and some of those position battles for the Packers.
Appreciate you, Joe. Thanks so much for having me on.